So, you all really like the frostbite and the freeze mechanic debate. Well, I've got another one for you. But let me set up the situation for you. There you are. Your opponent leads with an Amoonguss. You have just one turn to shut it down. Either KO it or taunt it to stop it. It'd Terra, you predict right. Good one-hit KO and oh. But wait, you just got faked out. No matter, you can still... Well, there goes that plan. Now you're asleep. Next turn you won't be able to move. But worry not, or worry so, depending on your point of view, because Legends Arceus has an alternative to being put to sleep as well, though it's not exactly the best alternate, like how Frostbite was for Freeze.
Is there more to us than the words we say, the games we play? Can we know that we're not dreaming?
Look, trainers, nothing changes when we see our Pokemon poisoned in battle, having varying degrees of burn applied to them, and shuddering at the fact that they just got paralyzed, especially on a daily basis. We hate when it happens to them, because it almost always ruins our original plans during a battle. The only Pokemon that don't mind suffering a condition are Pokemon with Guts and Pokemon with the Magic Guard ability. But, much like how the one status we hate suffering most, that of Freeze, there's another we hate suffering because it stops us from moving entirely, and that is Sleep. Sleep immobilizes a Pokemon for a full turn, and more if the dice don't roll in your favor. Should your Pokemon suffer from sleep, you have to wait a few turns before they'll eventually wake up. It can be as little as enduring just one turn of sleep, or at most an agonizing 3 turns. But, just like with Freeze, your Pokemon is spinning a wheel to determine if it wakes up and can attack that turn, or not. The only difference, unlike with Freeze, you will eventually wake up, as the first turn of sleep is mandatory, and after that, you have a chance to wake up with it ever increasing as the turns go by. I'm still not paying for that monument to be rebuilt. I don't care, I'm still not paying for it. In fact, let's do a test spin right now, starting the turn after your mandatory turn of sleep. After the first turn, you have 2 more turns of where your Pokemon is asleep before it's required to wake up. Remember, unlike Freeze, you will eventually wake up, so the wheel will reflect that. So if you stay asleep, it's removed from the wheel and then your odds go up of waking up the next turn. And the wheel spins, and unfortunately, turn 2, you are still asleep. Well, that's unfortunate. You're still asleep, but with the odds now 50-50, you have a very high chance of waking up turn 3. Unfortunately, you're still asleep. But since that was 3 turns of sleep, you now wake up on turn 4. It was unfortunate, but you know what? It happens. Just like how it also happens that you can wake up after your mandatory turn of sleep, as this spin demonstrates. After doing a bit more research, there are a total of 9 moves that the player can use, with an additional 1 move that only exists for an NPC Pokemon, specifically the Starmobile from the Segan squad, that can cause sleep in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And by far the most popular user of a sleep move is in VGC's very own spore-spamming Amoonguss. Battling while sleeping is frustrating. Just like with Freeze though, you do have options, but unless you're specifically planning for it, they aren't always optimal to run. Moves like Sleep Talk will allow you to call upon one of your other moves during battle, but it's a 1 in 3 chance in which you'll get it, and the move only works if you're asleep. So if you wake up and you use Sleep Talk, it'll fail. You can also run moves like Uproar, which locks your Pokemon into a normal special attack that deals damage to a random opponent for a few turns. But while your Pokemon is causing an uproar, no Pokemon on the field will fall asleep. And the final move that I can explain that attacks through sleep is the move Snore, which not only will deal damage, but also have a 30% chance to cause flinch to the target. But, of course, as expected, it only works if your Pokemon is, well, asleep. For most of Scarlet and Violet's VGC history, there was a saying that, I started, that others also agreed with. There were only two reasons to go Terra Grass on a Pokemon. Either you were removing a water or ground weakness on a Pokemon, or Amogus was on the other side of the field. Since Grass had so many weaknesses, fire, flying, bug, ice, and poison, it was a very bad typing by itself. But Pokemon like Heatran, who have the ability Flash Fire, made it work since it was immune to fire. Other Pokemon like Dondozo with Tatsugiri and Iron Hands used it because they were so bulky that they weren't threatened too much, but needed that immunity to spores and couldn't risk being put to sleep during the battle. It's not far-fetched to see in a VGC match where one person just can't battle because his Pokemon keep getting put to sleep. In fact, that's why Smogon has a sleep clause. Cause a sleeping Pokemon can't do anything 95% of the time. But now we move on to the other side of the coin. I talked about sleep, but what about this other condition I mentioned? Drowsiness in Legends Arceus, which replaced the sleep condition, much like how Frostbite replaced Freeze. Well, drowsiness replaces sleep, and it acts similar to how confusion works. While a Pokemon is drowsy, not the Pokemon drowsy, by the way, but the condition, it has about a 33% chance of not being able to act during the turn. Whereas confusion itself is a 50% chance of hitting yourself. In fact, it's only slightly worse than being paralyzed, where your odds of not moving are 25%. So, drowsy is just a better form of confusion and paralysis. What's wrong about that, you may be asking? Well, they tried to balance it out in Legends Arceus by making it so a Pokemon that is drowsy, while having a 33% chance to just not act that turn, also receives 33% more damage from other Pokemon. To give you an idea, the most popular Ruinous legend in VGC, Chien Pao, has an ability called Sword of Ruin, which reduces all Pokemon's defense stats around it by 25%, while Chi-Yu does the same but for the special defense stat. So basically, a drowsy Pokemon will be suffering a slightly worse version of both Chien Pao and Chi-Yu's abilities without those Pokemon being on the field. But at the very least, you have a much higher chance of being able to attack compared to Confusion, which was only worse than the odds of being paralyzed. I did a poll asking about which people prefer, and it was such an even split given how little reach my channel gets. Half of the people who voted want to give Drowsy a try, while the other half want to stick with Sleep. I think this is because, unlike with Frostbite, it's much harder to validate being able to attack given the downside of taking so much more damage. But, as is the way, this opens the possibilities to potential balancing options. Some people prefer Sleep because they probably don't like the idea of taking even more damage, given how many teams Chien Pao and Chi-Yu are on. While on the flip side of the coin, those who want Drowsy probably like the idea of being able to attack and move and are willing to take the extra damage they'll take in exchange. After all, the effect is only temporary, unlike Frostbite where you'll be stuck with the condition until the battle's over or you manage to cure it. I honestly can't say I prefer drowsiness over sleep. Unlike with Frostbite and Freeze, there's no real good upsides to it that would benefit the competitive community, other than it's new. This is honestly one of those we need to experiment in a simulation setting like Smogon kind of idea before it becomes a thing. On one side, I hate being unable to act, but on the other, I would like to not take even more damage from a Chien Pao Sucker Punch without the benefits of a Focus Sash. But what are your opinions? Do you like the idea of drowsiness, or is the trade-off too much to be a replacement for sleep? Tell me down below in this comment section. Like, subscribe, do all the things if you like the video, and help share it and spread it around. And what topic should I talk about next? Honestly, these are actually kind of fun. Give me some more ideas. More ideas. I'm listening. Have a good day, though. Bye-bye!
When you've reached the point where you can't go on, just come to me, you'll be safe from harm. If you trust in me, then I'll trust in you. There's nothing more that I need to do. If you put your hands in front